chasing all these dreams, I'm getting very close. Your work shouldn't feel like work if you really love it. If you set and you know your worth, then think if it's worth it. But I do count my blessings first, so you know I'm grateful every night. But watch me, baby, I'ma take it there. Tell ya I'ma stay the path. Tell ya I've been chasing all these dreams, I'm getting very close. Here we go. Your work shouldn't feel like work if you really love it. If you set and you know your worth, then think if it's worth it. But I do count my blessings first, so you know I'm grateful every night.
So welcome to the Mind Growth Mission. This is your host, David Schweit. And usually, guys, I have the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, the people starting up something new, making different transitions in their life. Well, this is one of those stories of inspiration, making changes. But this is my first pastor that I'll have on. So it's a man of faith, a brother, a friend, just all around great dude that I've known since we used to work together and have a lot of fun together. And now he's in Charleston, South Carolina, one of my favorite places. But welcome to the show, Heath Caldwell.
Thanks, David. It's great to be on, and it's great to be your first pastor you've had on the podcast. It's an honor.
Yeah, man, I get a lot out of people that are strong in faith. Some of my most inspirational leaders in life come from a following of Christ background. And I think that's really important, whatever your faith may be, to use that to help fuel you and help you get through some difficult times, but also just the warm embraces, right? Like, you don't have to agree and be about the same things, but as long as you're faithful and true to your word and care about others, like, you know, live in that passion, live in that faith, and that faith can look like whatever it looks like for different individuals, right? Everybody has their own path. So I want you to speak on some of that, man. Like, obviously we'll get to that, but we know each other from more of the having fun, working out together, going out together, working at a place with a culture where I'd say it was like a mini frat, basically. It was almost like a college culture for a technology company in Red Ventures. And one thing that really struck me about you, man, you've always been the super genuine, super nice, super humble guy. And I just love your path. That's why I'm having you on, man. I want you to share your story. But let's go back a little further. Heath, like, where are you from? What are you about? What were you into early on? How did we end up working at Red Ventures together?
Absolutely. Hey, and thanks for all the kind words. I appreciate that. I can't believe it's almost been 10 years to the day that I started at Red Ventures. But early life, I grew up in North Carolina, not far from where you're at in Charlotte. It was a small town about 30 minutes outside of Charlotte, Mount Holly, North Carolina, right in the whole Belmont, Mount Holly, Gastonia area. Born and raised there, lived there all the way until I was 18, graduated, went to Western Carolina University, did political science there, minored in entrepreneurship, funny enough. So I've always had that little bit of an itch inside of me too. And growing up, just to give a little bit of insight of how I was there, what I went through and how I came here, I grew up in a household that was a family of faith. We were at church pretty much anytime the doors were open, Sunday, Wednesday. It was kind of a routine. And funny enough, when I was 5 years old, I thought that I was going to be a pastor. Now, if you fast forward from 6 until probably 23, 24, if you asked me that, I would have said, do you know who I am? Are you crazy? So it's kind of funny how full circle life can be. But so I grew up then, and then when I went to Western Carolina, I never really had a faith of my own. And the faith of my own that I have now is what my life is built on. It's what single-handedly completely changed and transformed my life. But at that time in my life, this is 2014 for a time reference, I get away from my parents for the first time. I'm into the whole college life. I join a fraternity, was actually one of the recruitment chairs for the fraternity, and I'm just out, completely put my faith on the back burner, was just living the full college experience. So that was 2010 to 2014. 2014, I graduate and I do what any young millennials trying to do. It's like, I got to get a job. I got to grind. I got to be successful. And I'd heard sales is where it's at. Sales is where you can take that next step. And I got offered a job literally a week after graduation at Red Ventures. I remember walking in there the first time. I was like, what did I get myself into? It's like, here I come into a call center, but it was kind of like a fun, like over glorified call center. And I still remember, this is the first day I actually met David. I walk out on the sales floor and we're doing our first little test call. They used to call it like driving or something. I don't know if you remember that, David.
Of course.
And I'm sitting there shaking, nervous as can be. My first ever call, like I'm getting red, sweaty. And I walked through the whole thing. It was like probably an hour and 20-minute call. The call is supposed to be 20 minutes, but I closed the sale on my first call and I was like just blown away. But I was sitting there thinking inside, I was like, can I really do this? And David and a few of the other people, they were already like professional sales reps at the time. They're like, oh, it gets easy. It just becomes routine. You can do it in your sleep. And that was my first interaction with you. I don't know if you remember that. That was in the old North Charlotte location. But so at the beginning, fast forward a little bit into that career, about 2-3 months in, I was doing awful at sales, like bottom of the barrel, close to a PIP. If you don't know what a PIP is, the performance improvement plan, which means you're about to get fired. But I had a mentor and a leader there that poured into me. His name was Keith Henning. David, you might remember him.
Yeah, for sure. Big Keith.
Big Keith.
Big
he
arms.
said, he told me, he pulled me aside. He said, you got the drive, you got the motivation, you got the charisma. You can be good at this if you want, but you're going to have to let me be tough on you. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So fast forward 3 months later, he had me in the top 10% in the whole company, in the sales, you know, that little graph we used to follow. I still have screenshots of those, by the way. So I was technically crushing it there, and I was making money, had bought a new sports car. I don't know if you remember my 370Z or not.
Oh, yeah.
Was technically like checking off the boxes of what I was supposed to be doing. But down deep in my heart, I was empty. I felt like the job, the commission, the striving to get to number one, the living, going out with my friends, all that. I felt like that was something that I was trying to stuff in a void in my heart that couldn't be filled by all those things. And I truly believe it's because of my parents' faith when I was a kid of always having me in the church, that I knew that void could only be filled by one thing. And that was a void that needed to be filled by God. So I start looking around because I didn't want to go back home and like go to my parents' church. I'm sitting here Googling, start looking around, just find a church in the local area. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to that church this coming Sunday morning, and I'm just going to see what it's all about. Maybe that's what I've been missing. So I went, attended, just went through the motions. Nothing really just like clicked. It wasn't that first moment, but I felt good after. I was like, I need to go back. So I did that for weeks on weeks. It was probably about 3 or 4 months that I was doing that. And then at that time, there was something inside of me that just clicked during one of the sermons. And at the very end, the pastor was doing this response call, like, hey, no matter how far you've gone away, no matter what you've done, no matter what your past is, if you want to completely surrender your life, you can do that today. There's grace, there's forgiveness, there's mercy that only comes through the person and work of Jesus. If you want to do that, lift up your hand. I kid you not, David. I lifted up my hand, fell to my knees, and just started bawling. And I prayed this prayer. I said, Lord, you know how bad I've been. You know all the things I've done. You know how I completely abandoned you for the last few years. I was like, I want to start fresh here, and I will do whatever you want me to do. I'll go wherever you want me to go. I want to live your path. And honestly, that was a young, naive prayer. For thinking now, like, knowing what I've traveled down, I'd be like, oh, I don't know if you want to do all that, but I did it, and I was just in full faith. I got plugged in to a church, got plugged into an online Bible study. Back this was back before online Bible studies or what they are now. But the biggest thing I did, the thing that single-handedly changed my mind, was I picked up the Bible for the first time, and I wasn't just listening to what the pastor was saying. I wasn't just listening to what I was reading online. I was reading it for myself, and it's like it came alive to me. I was like just addicted to it. Like I just couldn't, when you find a good book or you find a good podcast, you just want to keep consuming it. That's how I was with the scripture. And I was like, this is real to me for the first time in my life. And granted, I'm still working my job, hanging out with my friends, going to the gym, big part of my life at that point. Mm-hmm. And it was over the course of about 3 or 4 years where I really just dove, head first into my faith. And I tell people it was during that time and one time at Liberty University where I grew like a quote unquote spiritual weed. And it's like, I can't describe it talking about it because It was just so like wild to me. But during that time, a lot of mentors and people in the church were telling me like, hey, there's a call of God on your life. There's a call of God on your, like, I don't think you're supposed to be in the corporate world or the business world. I think you're supposed to be in ministry. And I was like, no way, not me. Like, I abandoned God. I just gave every excuse of why I shouldn't. And at this time, I'd actually switched from Red Ventures. I was selling insurance at the time. And I just kept praying and praying and praying. And the funny thing is, the guy who owned the insurance agency, he actually had a master's of divinity and a doctorate degree in ministry. And more people just kept speaking into my life. And they're like, do you see how clear this is? And that's actually what led me to starting to look at schools and figure out where I would want to go to do seminary, because I have a master's in Christian ministry now. But I was like, I'm so new to all this. It's like, I cannot just go into ministry with a head that's on fire for Jesus, but no knowledge. I need to really ground myself more in the knowledge. And that's what led me going to Liberty to get my master's in Christian ministry, which then it was from the moment I surrendered that day where I literally fell to my knees bawling, like God has just orchestrated and ordained every step of the way now. And it's blown my mind.
Yeah, and Liberty's no joke. I mean, when you think about like religious studies, that's the top of the top, right? The cream of the top. And I think when I noticed that you were going that route, I was like, you know what? I'm proud of this guy, like making the change and going through it, because I know it's not going to be easy, but there had to be something to push him and lead him that way. And for you to say like there was a calling, there was a build up, there was just all these messages coming through telling you that like, hey, this is what I need to do. And then you do it, you make it happen. Right. And then from there, your time at Liberty, a couple years in, obviously to become a pastor, I would assume, right? That was your goal.
Right.
So what was it like actually going through religious studies, first of all, for a university like that, but to completely, let's just say it for what it is, like change your life around, a new direction? I mean, what was that feeling? What were the tough things that occurred during that time, maybe while you were studying and in that stage? Because I'm looking at it now, this is like a couple of years after you were working at Red Ventures. And right. I guess that gap is the insurance company. So there's things that kind of led you to it, but during it, I know for some people, when they are very clear on a vision, a lot of things become easier for them. Right. And then others as well, it might be clear, but it's just even more challenging than they ever expected. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And back to what you just said, when I first made that big decision to kind of change my life and walk a different route, like one of the things, like we care so much what people think and what people say about us. And that's one thing that I'll give you credit to. Like a lot of my friends, when I completely changed the way I lived my life, the way I walked my life, the things I did, the places I went, Like I had a lot of friends that were like good friends. I'm talking people that I'd known for years upon years that were like brothers that I was locked arm with, just completely abandoned ship, just completely throw me to the curb. But thankfully, you were one person that, even though you weren't on the exact same path as me at the time, you always encouraged me, always motivated me, always pushed on, told me you were proud of me. So I give you props for that, because it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you see someone who you consider a good friend just completely change their life. But so at Liberty, man, it was such a blessing, because so when I was still in the insurance world and still surrounded by a lot of my people that I went from living one way to another way, it was kind of hard, because it's like I'm trying to explain to them and get them to understand what the vision that God has put in my heart. And it was a lot more difficult to understand. When I got to Liberty, I was surrounded by like-minded people who were like motivated for that same vision that God had given them. So in a lot of ways, it made things so much easier. I remember the first Sunday that I was there at Liberty, they had this grad school induction ceremony. It was all the students who were going to be in graduate school at Liberty. And it was basically a church service. It was praise and worship. It was a motivating word like of encouragement, but it was from Scripture, which I'll caveat into this. Scripture is the best leadership book ever written. Like right. Even Lead Like Jesus, one of the most read leadership books in the world, gets its principles from the Bible. But I'll digress from there for a minute. But when I got walked out of that first grad school induction ceremony, I sat on the steps and I said, this is not normal. This place is special. And I had tears running down my eyes, and I prayed and I said, God, don't let me take this for granted. This was special. Because it's like, I knew that place was different. I had gone to a normal secular school, and now I'm at a private Christian school. And it was just like, everyone there was so motivating, encouraging. Like, I tell people, one of the things that blew my mind the most, the professors there cared more about how you were doing than they did about your academic performance. They wanted to make sure you were good as a person and that they could encourage you and push you on in your walk before they ever brought up grades or any school topics, which that means a lot, because we're humans first. We're people first before we're students. So that had a huge impact on me. But there is, even with all the good, there's difficult things too. Again, I had a gap from undergrad to grad school. Yeah. So it's like I had been out of the books for 4 years. Hadn't been used to writing papers and stuff. And then it's not just going back into undergraduate level. I went straight into graduate. And then a lot of these people in my classes, they're straight out of undergraduate school, which they went to undergrad for ministry. Here I am, had a secular undergraduate degree, now in a master's for Christian ministry. And so I just realized that was one of the things where I realized it was something like Keith had told me earlier. He's like, if you want to lock in, you want to focus, you want to grind, you want to put the work in, you can do it. You're equipped. So I would literally lock myself away in the library and just grind it out. I was like, you know what? They might have more knowledge before, but I'm going to work harder. I'm going to study harder, and I'm going to walk into what God has called me to. Because I was 100% day. I mean, I've never been more sure about anything in my life as I was about stepping into Liberty, that I was doing what God had called me to. So I just put the time, the effort in. And the crazy thing is, two weeks in, I'm sitting in a research class, and the Dr. Randy Spencer, who became my mentor, great man of God, just mighty man, can't say enough about him. He walked in the class. He said, you get these 2 to 3 years of a master's education. He said, that's great. That's going to propel you. He said, Liberty's the best of the best. It's going to get you pretty much a ministry position wherever. However, if you apply that to practical application, then you can take it to the next level. If you want to meet with me, send me an email and I'll connect with you, and I'll open up plenty of ministry opportunity doors. And I'll stop there for a minute, but he is the one that opened every ministry opportunity I've had since all stem from that one email that I sent to him. So,
Wow, dude. And to hear you speak like this, obviously knowing you early in your career, when you weren't touched by faith as much yet, you were speaking different. Your attitude was a little different. Like your charisma, the way you move, the way you carry yourself was a little different. So seeing you now and the change within you, man, it's just so impactful. And it goes to show, like, that's part of why I'm doing this, but it goes to show that like you can always make that change. Like if you find that calling, you find that purpose within you, chase after it. You know, it leads to great things. It might not be how you might have plotted it out from the beginning, but that's fine because it'll take you somewhere because you're living, you know, passionately within your purpose,
right.
like you are. So to see that growth within you, man, it's truly amazing. And, you know, I remember some of these conversations we had when we were younger. It's totally different than a conversation like this now. And this is more meaningful to me. And this is why I do this, is stories like yourself, man. And,
Yeah.
you know, I see what you're doing now to get the message out there. You're doing more with social media. You're doing more like on your own when nobody's looking and nobody's watching as well. You know, not only have you done it, completed it, living in it, you do the things that it takes when nobody's watching and nobody's looking as well. You make sure to stay up on things and to keep it fresh, to keep growing, to keep learning. And I know that about you, and that's how you've always been when it comes to growth. And one thing I can say for myself too, man, working in that environment, yeah, kind of like we were together back then, you were kind of put in a place where, hey, you know, I'm not growing as an individual. I'm not getting any better. I'm not going after my passion doing this. So
Right.
there's a bigger purpose, bigger calling. And a lot of people think they have to shift completely out of what they're doing. But honestly, it's just making the time for the things that are important for you, right? And you either do that by like going all in and actually completely shutting down everything else, or still doing the things you need to do to provide, and then figure out the time slots to achieve the things you need to achieve. And at the time of your transition, obviously there's no kids, nothing else that's really a distraction for you. You probably, I don't know if you were single at the time when you were going into the education, were you?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. And now you're married, correct?
I am. Yeah, it was a different person, but yeah, I am
Yeah.
married now.
Yeah.
It's it's actually funny what you mentioned about how you saw me then versus now. My wife actually told me, she said, you know, if you look back at your old Facebook pictures versus now, she's like, it's a night and day difference where you
Yeah.
can clearly just see. So just the fact that you see that too, it's just what the Lord can do. So
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to put it in another light as well is when you chase after your goals, your dreams, yeah, there will be people that fall off and fall out of your life. And usually that's for the better, right? It's not the people that are going to lift you up to bring you to that deeper calling and the bigger and better places, right? But then there's people that latch onto you, they gravitate towards you, the mentors that come in your life and the people that are going to be that inspiration that you need for your life once you're following that passion. It's funny, like as I started this podcast and starting to post it out there to the world, had people reaching out to me is like, how do you start a podcast? How do you do these things? How do you get guests? How do you do blah, blah, blah? And it's like, you know, I didn't even think that, you know, it'd be anything because for me, it's enjoyable. I didn't even think anybody would even like want to learn from me on this, right? But the more you live in your passion, your purpose, the more people will look up to you as well. And now you're a leader of men in multiple ways. And you've even gone through some different things to help you grow, which hopefully we'll get into even more. So after Liberty, you mentioned a mentor, you mentioned somebody who's going to kind of open some doors for you. So what did that process look like? How did y'all's relationship work? And how did it grow and help you to get to where you are?
yeah, so I met Dr. Randy Spencer's second week of graduate school at Liberty, and he came in and just told us, hey, if you want real life experience to partner with that education, come see me. So I shot him an email, met with him the next week on a Wednesday, and it's probably around noon, 1 o'clock when we met, and I was sitting in there, and he was asking me, he kind of had me tell my story, and I was talking to him, and we just connected really well right off the bat. He was like, yeah, I think I can get some experience lined up for you, maybe have you teach a Sunday school class or whatever, kind of work your way in. And about an hour into this meeting, his phone rings, and he picks it up, and I just let him do his thing for a minute. And then he looks at me and he's like, I just had someone cancel this Sunday at Friendship Baptist Church. He was like, I don't know why, but I feel led to have you go fill in and speak there this Sunday. Are you willing to do that? And I was just completely blown away, because I had prayed that exact morning on my knees beside my bed in my apartment at Liberty. I had prayed. I said, Lord, I'm ready whenever you're ready. If you're ready to use me and send me now, I'm ready. So I said, absolutely. So that's on Wednesday. I'm preaching Sunday. I'd never preached before in my life. So like, that's a short gap to prepare. So I just go full in, prepare, get ready, go preach that Sunday. And it's a small church, middle of nowhere, Virginia. There's probably maybe 45, 55 people there total. Beautiful church, sweet people. And I get a phone call on Monday from him, and I'm sitting here thinking in my head, I'm like, I ruined it. They called him, told him how horrible it was. So he calls me. He says, hey, can you come meet with me? And now I'm really thinking, I'm like, oh man, I really done did it. Now I'm like, yeah, when do you have some time? So I go meet with him. He said, hey, he was like, I never get that many calls of how good it was. And at this point, I'm like falling out on the floor. So I'm like, what? I didn't even think I did good. So I meet with him. He said, hey, if I put you in another church this Sunday, can me and my wife come out and watch? Would you be open for that? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Praise God. Thank you. And so I'm like super excited. I call my sister, my brother-in-law, my parents. I'm like, hey, you guys might want to drive up to Virginia. This might be my last opportunity that I get to preach in front of a whole church. I don't want to blow it in front of my mentor, but if you want to see me, come. So my sister, brother-in-law, niece, nephew, they drive up. It's like 5.5 hours to the church. They find a hotel in the middle of nowhere close to the church. And I preach at that church. He's there. And whenever we leave, he's like, hey, can I take you and your family out to lunch? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And he sat down in front of me, and I'll never forget this. He said, as long as you want to preach for the rest of your time here at Liberty, I'll provide you the opportunity. He was like, I see the call of God on your life. It's evident. I can see it clear as day. Do you want to keep doing this? And I was like, absolutely. I was like, I believe that God has called me to do this, and I want to walk into the fullness of what he's called me to do. So for the next about 9 months, till I was about halfway through seminary, because I finished in 2 years, I did that same thing. And then this one church, this sweet church, it was real small. It was dying. They couldn't afford a full-time pastor. They wanted to call a part-time pastor who was a student. They had asked me if I wanted to be their pastor. And I told him, I said, let me think about it. Let me pray about it. I went and met back with Dr. Spencer. I said, Dr. Spencer, I'm honored, humbled, honestly blown away that they would even consider this. But I was like, I don't feel like I'm ready yet. I don't feel like I'm there yet. I was like, do you have any churches that are a little bit bigger, that have a senior pastor who's firm, who's solid, who's been doing it a long time, where I could maybe sit under, work as their assistant? Right. And at this point, he was like, I'm actually shocked that you're humble enough to realize that you want more time in the saddle and not to just go get the title and be out there preaching away. I was like, honestly, I don't feel like God has put me there yet. So then he connected me with a pastor at Timber Ridge Baptist in Virginia. And I ended up working under a guy named Pastor Phil. Great experience. But for the rest of my time at Liberty, that's where I worked at. I worked as kind of his assistant, did a little bit of everything. Like if there's a thing you can name at a church, I did it. Great experience. It was awesome to get to know every little aspect. So that was kind of the time at Liberty. And then I graduated with my master's at Liberty in the most ideal time ever when you want to go find a job. May of 2020. I don't know if you remember anything about that time of the year,
Yeah.
the time in our
COVID
country,
hit hard.
everything was shut down. So like trying to find a job was absolutely wild. But God, He is faithful and true. I actually had helped do a lot of online stuff at that small church in Virginia. And there was a church in Charleston, South Carolina, Seacoast Church, where I was at before my position now. They were hiring a digital ministry leader. And it's like, of all things. And so I had applied, done video interviews for that, and they told me they were on a hiring freeze. And I was like, well, every company, every church, everything, every nonprofit in the world is on a hiring freeze. That's fine. And then they called me about a month later, and they said they're going to lift the freeze for one position. It's your position. Do you want it? And I was like, let me think about it. Let me pray about it. And then I ended up accepting it. And that's how I initially landed in Charleston during the middle of a pandemic. So
Yeah, I remember coming to see you out there, man, and thank you for taking the time to meet up with us when we were out there visiting. And I was excited for you. I was like, man, this is a tough time, though. I know that, but South Carolina was a little looser than most states on how they were operating under COVID, so we were lucky enough with that as well. But also, I mean, the calling. I mean, it just led you to a situation that you couldn't even have, fathom, right? Like you would think it's the worst time, the scariest time. Like, what do I do now? Like, how long is this going to last? Okay, I'm getting this opportunity, and it's the perfect opportunity, and it's something that'll last. You think of the digital age, like people are going to need to get that contact from afar. And you see other churches out there really excelling, and that is the digital platform and live streaming and everything else. Not saying you're going after being a huge, big church, but I'm saying the way you reach the audience these days is different. You have to be open to it. You have to get out of your comfort zone a bit. And you've been able to do that. And, you got a lot of growing ahead, but you've done so much already, man. And it's truly awesome to see and be a part of. And every time you post, I get happy. I got to tune in to see what you're putting on social media, because I like those clips, man, and your messages and what you're about. And like I said, how you speak now versus how you spoke then, right? Back when I first met you, it's just a world of difference. I feel it oozing out of you, that passion for your faith and for life and for how you're living now, and how you are with your family and everything else. I'm sure all that's molded and changed and increased to a higher level as well. But we're all real people here. We got real life challenges. Absolutely. You mentioned some challenges with like getting out of school. It's a private school. I don't know how you were paying for it at the time or still paying for it, but we all experience these student debts from one time or another, or paying for certifications or paying in some way. So when you were doing that stuff while you were in school, was it helping you pay for school? Or was it something where it's volunteered? Like, how does that work when you're a pastor? Yeah. Or do you happen to get lucky where things are kind of paid for? Because, obviously some churches are well known for money, but a lot of churches are known for a lot of volunteer work. So I'm really not sure how that goes. I'm not sure if you're willing to mention that, but it's just something I'm curious about. And anybody that wants to get into being a pastor, I'm sure they'd want to know some of these things before getting involved, right?
Yeah, we can talk about it. So I went with a whole lot of faith and not a lot of money. So
Fair enough.
so I actually sold that Nissan 370Z I had. I loved that car, but I was willing to sacrifice that for what I knew was coming. So I sold that. I got a 2011 Ford Fusion. It drove. It was fuel efficient. It got me from point A to point B. And I took out loans that whole first year. I mean, this was for the apartment, the food, meal plan, school, and everything. But God started working immediately. I mean, that second week when I started preaching in those churches, they gave you like a little stipend. I mean, it could be $50 all the way up to $200. So I mean, it's something. It was gas and food money if my dining hall pass didn't cover it. So that was the start. And then during that process, I learned about a scholarship that I was eligible for. So I applied for that. So my whole second year completely paid for on a scholarship. Plus that church I was working for, since I was an assistant, they couldn't really pay me like a salary. But what they did do is they had a parsonage on campus, which is basically just a house that the church owns. It's usually on the church property or close to the church property. They let me live in it for free. So, I mean, I stepped out on that faith and went there literally nothing, loans and a cheap clunker car. And then God just started making it happen there, because like you said, the majority of churches, they're not like this. I tell tons of people, if you're getting in ministry to make money, to get rich, you're going into the wrong thing. Like go somewhere else. Because the far and few that you might see on social media or TV that are making it, like, that's the very, 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 very rare exception. It's got to be something way deeper inside than that. So yeah, that's kind of how it worked going in. Thankfully, when I did graduate, and I took my first position at Seacoast down in Charleston, that was a full-time paid salary position. So God has been faithful throughout these last, I guess I got to Charleston May of 2020. So all the way till now, 2023, he's been very, very faithful.
Yeah. And so during COVID, you were in that digital ministry leadership role for a little over a year. And then you went to being the campus pastor, which I assume would be in person.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I had always, I felt like my call was to pastor people in person, face to face, but I knew COVID was a very different circumstance. So I told the guy who was hiring me at the time, I said, hey, I'm all in for this digital stuff. I'm going to help you guys grow. I'm going to grow. We're going to learn and grow together. But if the world ever just happens, because back then we didn't know, I was like, if the world ever happens to open up and be normal again, I want to pastor people. I want to pastor real live human beings. And so that's when I transitioned to be the campus pastor at McClellanville. And that's what I did all the way up until March of this year, leading into my new position here.
Yeah, and you're wearing the shirt, so go ahead and give them a shout out.
Repping Crowfield Baptist Church.
Yeah, and you're still in Charleston, obviously. And do you see yourself staying in Charleston? Is that like home for you for a while? I mean, is it a place that touches your soul? Because as we all know that are in the South, Charleston's known for its churches and known for his presence, right. And being in the South in general, It's known as the Bible Belt. So I feel like you're at the ideal place somebody in your career path would want to be. So do you see yourself sticking it out there, or just waiting for different callings in the future? Or, how are you looking at it as home, and are you willing to be flexible with that?
Yeah, so it's another, I mean, this is just divine. I love Charleston. I see myself staying here. I met my wife here. So this is a full circle story. So Crowfield Baptist Church, my wife grew up in this church. this is going to blow your mind. So
Wow.
when I was the campus pastor at Seacoast, we were living about an hour from that campus. So I was commuting back and forth, back and forth, back and
Mm.
forth, because I was essentially going from one outskirt of Charleston, because I live about 20 minutes from downtown Charleston, to the opposite side of a different outskirt to where my campus was. And we were praying, we're like, and if we have kids and stuff, it's going to be very hard to have our kids in that community. And it's just us driving back and forth. It takes like, she's a school teacher. She gets off at 3:30, 4 o'clock just for her to drive out there and drive back. Our whole night is gone. So we were just praying from the time we got married until we heard about Crowfield. We were just praying like, God, is there something that's more in line with what you have for us and as a family? And one of her friends, who was a fellow teacher who just retired, she's like, hey, my church, Crowfield, they have a position called the Great Commission pastor position that's available. And she said, I think the senior pastor might even be retiring in a few years, and it could be, depending on how that person does, be the kind of launching pad for that. Do you think your husband would be interested? And she tells me this, and I start looking into it. And at first I was like, I don't know. But I told her, I said, we should pray about it. And we just started praying and praying and praying. About a month goes by. We're driving on a Sunday morning to Seacoast McClellanville, my previous church. I said, Sarah, look over in the truck. I said, I got to call that pastor. I got to schedule a meeting. I feel like God is leading us there. So I called him, emailed him. We met up, and this is right around Christmas time of this year, and Christmas time of this past year. Christmas time for church is just crazy. But he made the time, I made the time. We got together, and theologically, like personality wise, just everything checked the box. We were like same mindset, same passion, running the same direction. So then I went through the whole process of coming on board here, and it's just been such a blessing. So to sum up what you asked, we truly believe that this is the exact place that God has us for this exact season, and really for long term. I mean, unless he like literally God grabs us both, and it's going to have to be a pretty hard grab, and it's like, hey, you're going somewhere. We feel that this is home. This is where we're going to be. So
Wow. Think about like the law of attraction and how you end up at a place you were meant to be, right? And her connection
yeah,
with it and everything else, man. It's just, man, when you think about the universe in that way and the places it puts you, it's just amazing, right? And
yeah,
you've been seeing it firsthand, and I'm sure the people you interact with within your church and trials and tribulations and things they've overcame or places they've been and things they've done for others, for themselves, what have you. You see it all as a pastor. You see the
right,
good, bad, the ugly, people dying, bad health, everything, right? I mean, you see it all. You see all the miracles, all the glory, all the greatness too. So you get the full spectrum of life and how it's lived and the things that can happen and for you. And, it's one of those things, man. I listen to a lot of Ed Milet, who's also a faithful guy as well. And he's always like, things happen for you, not to you. So when people think things that are negative are happening to them, well, what are you learning from it? How are you
yeah,
growing through it and all that, right? And you're taking one thing at a time, one challenge at a time and rolling with it. I like how you always begin it with like, hey, I prayed on it. You took some time to just think about it and let it touch your heart, touch your soul in the right way before making that decision. And I think that's very important. I think you should always go after your passion, your calling, whatever that may be, because that's how I think you excel, get out of your comfort zone.
yeah,
It pushes you even further, right? But at times people are just kind of feeling stuck in what I do. Well, think about the things you're attracted to. Think about the things that you consume your life with. Think about the things that make you happy, that make you feel really, really good inside, Those are probably the things you should follow. So I want to get to that with you, man. If somebody's searching and they're like stuck and, maybe they need a little faith in their life and they haven't had it in a while and they're really feeling down, maybe down on the dumps, maybe not being led to the right thing. And, instead of going to the water, they're going to the dry land where there's nothing really there for them. They're out there in the desert, like searching and seeking things, and it leads them to the wrong things time after time. And what do you say to somebody that might need that pick me up and might need a little bit of faith in their life, man? How do you direct them to that place? How do you tell somebody like, hey, this is what you need in your life, or this could help you? What do you say to them?
Absolutely. I would tell them, hey, you're never too far gone. It doesn't matter if you feel like you've ran out of every possibility, every opportunity. And me, of course, I would point them to my faith. The scripture says that faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. And I would encourage them, if they are a believer, to get plugged into a group of good men, women who can spur that faith on, who can encourage that faith. And even if they're not, maybe they've lived the crazy life, but they don't even know who God is. They've never been to a church. I would tell them, hey, the church isn't just a place where quote unquote perfect people, because there are no perfect people, go. It's a place for sinners. It's a place for broken people to find a wholeness, to find a completeness that can, I personally believe, can only come from God. So I would just encourage them to seek that out. But I think it's so important to have people that are in your corner that can spur that faith on, that can encourage you. And like you said, Ed Milet, I've heard him say how things don't happen to you, they happen for you. I believe as a Christian, the Bible says in Romans chapter 8 that all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So I believe those bad things that I went through, those hard things, and those good things, they all work together to get me to where I'm at now. I think it just takes a mindset shift, a perspective shift of seeing things from like a divine perspective versus just inward me perspective. Because I'll end this part with something funny. I said from 5 until 20, probably 23, 24, I'd never be a pastor. My wife also said when she left this church in her younger days, she said, I'd never go back to that church. Look at us both now. We're at this church, love it. It's the most God-ordained situation, and I'm a pastor at it. So it's like we can try and outsmart God, but at the end of the day, he gets the final laugh. And it's a lot easier when we're in sync and in rhythm with his plan versus trying to do our own thing. It just flows better.
I thought you were gonna say she was never gonna date a pastor. But I love it, man, and it's so true. And you made the point earlier, though, like, hey, I've sinned, I've done these shameful things, I've been down this path, and faith will take you in no matter your past, right? Like things will take you in no matter your past. It's about what are you thinking about? Where do you want to be? What's the future behold for you? Like no one knows that but God, right? But at the end of the day, if you want to put yourself in a better position and be a better person, you can always go after being the better version of yourself. I think more people are going to be rooting for you than against you to do that, no matter your background. People want to be a part of those stories. People want to feel that. They want to be a part of that love and the energy that you give off when you make these changes for yourself. And what's funny, I've been known as like the partier, the outgoing type, and I started to do this, and people probably aren't taking me seriously, but I don't care about all that. It's about like what I'm passionate about, how I can like help others. I want people to know that like, hey, if here's one image of you, if here's the reputation of you, it doesn't always have to be. You can make these changes for yourself and strive to do more and be more in your life. You can make more of an impact on others. And that's one word that stood out to me when we worked at Red Ventures. You remember all those little words they had? Yeah. And I think a lot of it was probably like very biblical, because it was all these words that just were about energy, passion, agility, whatever. But I think that was the biggest one that stood out, man, is making an impact. What does that mean? I always thought about what that means, like making an impact. Yeah, I was a top sales guy. I was able to be a leader in some form, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't care about the others, right? If you don't care about the people around you, the ones you're helping out, right? And I had to really think about that. It's like I'm living more for myself than I am living for like helping others and doing things the right way. And maybe you were at that point in your life where, maybe you thought you were a little selfish, and maybe you want to be a little more selfless. And I've thought about that at times, and I'm like, what does that look like for me? And I thought, that network of people that I have, the amazing people I've been fortunate enough to be around, like yourself and many others, and a ton of them that I have on the podcast series here that hope you get to listen to. And everybody has their own story, right? But one thing is, man, like I've always thought, and people even told me, like, find ways to use your network. Well, this is just a hobby for me. I don't think I'll ever make money off doing this, and I'm totally cool with that. I just want to get these messages out there, people's stories out there, stories like yours where you can turn things around in your life to go after that deeper calling and how you can help others and impact others. And that's what I truly am understanding now. That's what it's about. I listen to a lot of podcasts like you. Some of the people that I love got together on Ed Milet's podcast. You have like Les Brown and all the big names out there, Jay Shetty, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the ones I think you should listen to, and you might already have, and a guy that's deep in faith as well, John Maxwell, is interviewed by Ed Milet. Did you listen to that one?
I haven't listened to that one, but I have listened to a lot of John Maxwell. So.
Yeah, and read his books and all that. But, when all these great thought leaders and people that are out there giving off hope and inspiration when they talk, you know what it's about? It's about how can they help others? How are they looking out for others? And that's how they're making that impact. So with you, you're directly affecting change and inspiration and being the source of hope in people's lives, man. So tell me, how does it feel? Because I think public speaking is one of the best skills in the world and one of the things that can make the biggest impacts in the world. You look at some of the best leaders, presidents and global leaders and CEOs. One of the best qualities they have is how they're able to move an audience, how they're able to impact you off just pure speech. So tell me, is that something that you really had to work on? Is it just something that kind of you see mold slowly? Or is it just something that like once you found your calling, it clicked a lot easier? Or what does that practice and that method look like? And what do you get out of it? How does it make you feel now?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Like beforehand, like when I was in undergrad, I just despised the thought of public speaking. And then whenever I knew
well, why is that? Or are you about to chime in on that?
I'll chime in on that. So then whenever I realized that I was called to preach and to teach, which is in front of congregations, crowds, I realized that the reason I didn't appreciate it is because the things that I was speaking about wasn't in me. It wasn't what I truly believed and felt. It just wasn't there. So now I know that I can speak confidently and boldly, not because Heath is a good speaker, but because I know what God has placed in me. I'm passionate about that message, but it's still something you have to work at. I believe that I have to study, I have to prepare, I have to practice reciting what I'm going to do, because I don't want to go up there and make God look bad. Again, he's not worried about how I make him look. He's going to be fine. He's God. But I still have a duty and an obligation to prepare. And I'll tell you, it's real funny. I preached July 31st, I believe, the last Sunday of July. And it was the first time that I walked off, and I like actually felt like real good about it. I was like, you know what? I was obedient to that text. I think I was obedient to God. And I mean, I've been preaching now for, this is going on 5 years, and it took that long to finally have that feeling. And my wife had asked me, she was like, what do you think was different? I think, and I told her, I said, you know, it was a couple things, but I think one of the main things is it was a hard, challenging text for me. So I just kept pouring in and in and in, just studying, and then having to practice living it out. And I think that's kind of what clicked for me. So it's definitely something that, like, God can equip you and give you the gift, but then you got to develop it.
Absolutely. And you talk about the fear of speaking. I think when people think of like fears when it comes to like school or projects or things at work, I mean, I think public speaking is up there, right? It's a lot of
Yeah,
people's fear. But I think once you find a topic or find a message or find a purpose within what you're speaking about, the game changes, right?
absolutely.
Everything comes a bit easier there. Obviously, you're going to still have to work at it. But for you, once you found something that like truly is within you, and then you feel the spirit of, then hey, the game changes there. Now I'm going to prepare differently. I'm going to think differently. I'm going to consume it differently. I'm going to, change in a way to really put my all into it. And I think when you just fly by and just go lackadaisically about it, then yeah, I mean, no one's going to get anything out of that. You're not helping anybody else, and you're just going to decrease or digress, right? You're not going to
Right.
make your skills any better if you're not putting the right energy to it, and the positivity. And that's one thing about you, man, is the positivity, the enthusiasm. That's something you've always had. And I'm like, what's up with this guy? And then I started to learn, because not everybody's like that. A lot of people are just like kind of there, but they don't give that energy and focus, that awareness to others, right? The awareness
Yeah.
that people deserve. And then I started meeting more people that have been faithful and are faithful in life, and I started to realize like the way their energy comes off is just different. Their awareness level is a bit higher. The way they actually pay attention to the other person speaking is different, and the way they come across is just different. And it's not an act; it's the being of that person, and it's the spirit of that person, and it's what they're trying to give off to the world. The light that they're
Right.
showing, but they're living within that. They're actually making these changes and doing these things in their life to get them at a good enough place to give off that kind of energy. So when I started to meet more faithful people, I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome. So I couldn't imagine how it was at Liberty when you got so many people
Yeah.
living like that. And you brought that up earlier.
Yeah.
So how do you build that around you now as an adult? How have your relationships changed, your friendships changed? Obviously, you have an amazing wife who you're building a family with, and obviously that's a big help because you spend so much time with that person, right?
Yeah.
But you've had these mentors and these other people. How do you stay in touch, man? You're busier than ever. You're doing things differently now. You're adding things to your life. How do you build these relationships now? How has that part of your world changed?
Yeah. And I think the staying in touch aspect is something that you have to be very, very intentional about. Like, and you got to pick those certain people that, like, they're going to be your people, and you got to make that contact happen, because it's hard. The busier you get, the more people that are pulling that want your time. And in a church setting, there's not a lot of staff, but there's a lot of people. So you got a lot of different people pulling at you. So you can get caught up in that, but you still got to stay grounded in who you are. You got to, like, God blessed me with an amazing wife. Like, she's such a blessing. So I always try to keep her my priority. But I also, like, me and her, we have to stay surrounded by like-minded, Bible believing Christians, people on that same path as us, to encourage it, because the world's hard. The world can be tough. We just got to have people that are going to be able to encourage us, people who we can tell the hard things we're going through, they can tell us too. But then also, we have a responsibility as Christians. It's not just we sit here in our little country club and enjoy each other, but we have a responsibility and a duty to go out and find others. Like I think of me 10 years ago, how I was lost and there was a void. And it's like, man, I want to reach that person. I want to let her know that there is hope and there is something that can fill that void. And I've got the answer. So it's kind of a responsibility to bring them in, but also for us to have our core groups. That way we can stay energized and encouraged to go out.
Yeah, intentionality is key with a lot of things in life. And the older you get, the more you realize that. Because it's easy to live within your comfort zone, have the things come to you naturally. But when you're forcing yourself to go out there, you're forcing yourself to make time for the right things, that's when it gets a little tougher. You got to work on your time management, your focus, your prioritization, all the right things that you care about. You want to bring more of that into your life, not just let things just float by. Whatever's in my life already, let that be. You want to continue to grow, continue to challenge yourself, put yourself around others that are at different levels as well, and can get you to different levels as well. You want to be challenged in that regard. You want to be able to have these conversations. Right. You want to be able to appeal to more of an audience, right? And I think that's key. And when we talk about like society these days and how everybody lives on their phone and getting these quick hits of information, they can be pretty biased, and that can steer them down a different path. So when it comes to the church, when it comes to politics and the way people believe in these things, obviously there's different levels, there's different extremes of it. So what helps you maybe not fall into more of that extremist ideology, or the thing where you're just pushing it too much on people? Because what I see sometimes is people going too hard on these messages to make people believe things that they believe, when I think it should be more organic and more natural. So how do you go about that personally?
Yeah, so I truly believe that I can't make anyone else become a Christian. Like, that's a personal decision that they make. And I truly believe it's not even a mental decision. I think it's a heart decision. It starts in the heart, and the heart's going to transform the mind, and you're going to come to think about it. So it's not going to do me any good to take a Bible and just start banging it over the head on someone. However, I'm also not going to compromise my beliefs and convictions to tell someone a lie or something that's not the full truth. So I think it's balancing that aspect of showing the love of Christ and sharing the gospel of Christ, and it's finding that balance. Like I always try to be graceful in my approach, just because I know who I was in that, and I think about who I was then versus who I am now, and how would I appreciate the other approach. And something that's real impactful, you mentioned with like social media and all the quick hits, all the bad information, the different information that's out there. I heard a Billy Graham quote. I'm sure you've heard of Billy Graham before. People asked him why he was getting on the radio and the television. Like, they told him that was the devil's playground. He said, well, I'm going to flood it with the good. I'm going to put the good. I'm going to put the gospel in it, and I'm going to lighten up some of that bad. And so a lot of people are like, oh, social media is bad. It's of the devil. You hear all these crazy things. I said, well, that's okay. I'm going to use it for the good. I'm going to get the message out. These people that are mindlessly scrolling, they could need that hope. They could need that positivity. They need the message of the gospel, and they're going to get it right here on their phone. It could be that one little clip that leads to something else, that ultimately leads to them to have a fulfilling life in Christ. And I don't know if that answers your question, but
nah, man. I mean, as you're speaking, I'm just like, we need more people like you, Heath. And so thankful we're friends and been able to carry this relationship forward and continue to see each other grow and be a part of that. And for you to take the time today, it's amazing. I know it took some time to get this to happen, and I'm glad we did, man. I'm getting so much out of it, and I know anyone listening is too, because there's so many amazing things coming out of you here, and just to see you, man, like how strong you are in it, and how strong you are as a person, and what you're about, man. I love it. It's inspiring to me. But there's things like that have moved me in my life, man. It's to see these amazing people around me achieving great things, and no matter where they're at, I see the greatness within people. I take like an optimistic approach in things,
Yeah.
man. I'm always thinking about like the highlights of people. It's easy to get caught up in the negative, and we all sometimes get that little judgmental factor by accident that creeps into my mind, and we got to kick it out and realize, hey, what are the good things about this person that I'm seeing here? And for me, that's what I seek. I'm always looking for the good and inspiring, and like, holy cow, like I can learn this from this individual. So who are some of your influences, and what has you inspired other than God and faith itself? Who are some people that people can research or look up or read some of their books or see some of their messages online or YouTube or what have you? Who are some of these influences for you?
Yeah, man, you took the first one already. I was gonna say the Lord. I was gonna say God. So
Of course.
that's definitely the first one. That's the biggest, most profound influence on my life. Some people that I'm gonna do something different. I'm not gonna name the most popular people who people would think, but I'm gonna name some people. They're out there, and you can find their stuff that really have truly impacted me. But there's a guy named Vodi Bakum. Love him. You may have heard of him, but he's got a
Spell
lot
the
of stuff
first
on
name.
Vodi, Voddie.
Okay.
He's got a lot of great stuff. There's this guy, Paul Washer. He single-handedly changed the way I look at the faith, and kind of opened my eyes to the faith. So he's great. Jonathan Pokluda. He's another guy. He's pretty big on the whole Instagram and stuff like that. He pastors a church out in Texas. Those are some of the bigger influences that I listen to a lot. I've listened to it kind of like a different, whenever I'm not in the whole faith realm. I've listened to a lot of Ed Milet. There's a guy, Alex Hermosi. You probably heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to some of those guys sometimes when I'm just trying to let the mind rest. But there's a lot of stuff that they say that apply to business and building a business that applies to your life and the church as well. So I kind of take what I can from that as well. And it's always interesting to me. This is the funny thing. Ed Milet mentions it more, but some of these other guys, some of the principles that they're stating, even if they don't say that it's a biblical principle, a lot of it comes from Scripture. I know Ed Milet's pretty good about pointing out that from time to time, but a lot of these guys, a lot of the principles they get, I'm like, oh, light bulb moment. That's literally in Scripture. So
Yeah.
those are some of the guys.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too before we get out of here, because we kind of referenced it and glossed over it a little bit there. But the Bible preaches so many principles and lessons for us that all these top successful people end up using and preaching themselves, right? It's just, to appeal to their audience and to deliver the message in a way that the people that follow them can understand, right? But it all trickles down from the Bible and what you learn there and how you interpret it there. And it's awesome you mentioned that, because I think about that. We've had conversations about that before, me and you have. And that's one of my goals, actually. I've become more of a reader in my life as of late, and I'm reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F right now, which is a amazing book. And you talk about perspective there's a unique one for you. But it really talks about how you narrow down your focus, But one book I want to reference, since we're on it, You mentioned Ed Milet, his Power of One More, definitely referenced some of the principles from the Bible and things like that. But the way he delivers the message is awesome and very to the point, and takes real life examples and puts it out there. And I think that's a good read if you need something to read. I know you're busy reading and studying the Bible and everything else always anyways, but that's a good one, and it's an easy read, I'd say. But no, man, I mean, that, that learning, that growing aspect, that reading things that matter to me and that are important to me has changed my life and continues to change my life as it does with you. So what I want to get to is some of these habits, some of these routines, some of these things to help you become a better man. Maybe things you've joined or been a part of, or different groups or what have you, because you've kind of referenced all this. But tell me what's worked for Heath, what it looks like for Heath now, and what are some of these habits, routines, groups, things you're being involved with now that are really helping you grow?
Absolutely. I would say, man, I leaders are readers. You've heard that before, but I start, one of the biggest things that changed for me. I start every morning as soon as I wake up, even when my wife's still asleep. I go downstairs before I even brew my first cup of coffee, and I drink a lot of it. I spend time in prayer and in the scriptures, just reading, studying, really getting my mindset right. Some people are like, "Man, how are you always so positive all the time? How does your mind seem right?" It's like, I intentionally, every day, that's how I start. I get it right. It's not just natural, but I do believe that the Lord equips me to have it right. So, scripture, time in the Word, and then another big thing for me and my wife is intentional time together. Not where we're like with friends together, not where we're at church with different people, where it's just me and her, where we can talk, we can be real, we can have time together. We're real intentional about that. Thankfully, like, one of my passions is working out. You know this, we've lifted many times together, but my wife loves that too. So working out, that's a rhythm for me. Usually kind of the way my schedule looks from a 5,000 feet view is wake up, quiet time, prayer time, reading time, get ready, come here, work. Usually I usually go home and eat with the wife, or go somewhere and eat for lunch, and then go to the gym around 4 o'clock every day. And that's kind of like our set thing. And then after that, if we have activities with the church or other activities, we hit those. If not, me and my wife intentionally, we go on a walk together, and then we sit down and we'll do something mindlessly together. And then at night, right before bed, we go into like a devotional study together. And man, I'm telling you, like, that'll change your life. So that's kind of how it goes. And so
I love that.
yeah.
I love that. And any advice for married couples or people in relationships? I mean, I want to have that all over this show as well, man, because life is about relationships, right?
Yeah.
And how you grow within those, and how that helps you grow as a person, and how are you helping the others around you grow. And obviously the people you spend the most time with, you got to find ways to help each other and expand their minds.
Yeah.
So that's great advice, man. And that intentionality that we're speaking on, especially with, making that time dedicated to your partner, is so important. A lot of people get away from that, but I do hear people, like, they make dates for their spouse and significant other, like, as a routine, and map it out, put it on their calendar, make sure it's like a routine thing. And the fact that you're doing things each day with, or where you guys are helping each other grow and be even more in love, and in love with your faith and everything else, is just amazing. And that's how it should be, man. I mean, that's absolutely how to live a meaningful, fulfilling life, right? You got to find ways to help grow those relationships around you. And that intentionality is a perfect way to put it. And also, man, I just want to say, with what you're doing and the growth I'm seeing within you, man, is, once again, it's so inspiring. But I know you got so many more things to do are there any things such as maybe more public speaking to wider audiences in the future for you possibly, and also maybe writing your own books in the future? And what are some goals you have maybe 5-10 years down the road? And do you think about those things?
Absolutely. Yeah. So right now I'm plugged in at Crowfield Baptist Church, and kind of my goal is just to I'm all in here right now. My wife's all in. We just really want to, like, we believe that this is just the beginning. It's just the start. We know there's so much more that God's going to do in and through here. So we're really we want to build God's kingdom. We pray that He uses us to do that here. And I mean, we've seen a lot of excitement, momentum, and build up just in the short amount of time that we've been here. I've got a lot of, so I have a lot of that creativity, that passion to build. And this church here is just prone perfect to launch into a growth season. So I've had the privilege to work a lot on their social media, Facebook and Instagram. And you've seen, I've been doing a lot of reels and posts and stuff, really just trying to get the message out there, because I believe it's pertinent. Like if we avoid those things, we're just missing out on so many opportunities that God has given to us for literally free. So that's a big thing. And I do plan. So right now I'm on a preaching plan where I preach about once a month here, but that's set to next year increase as kind of the lead pastor gets closer to retirement. It'll be a setup for me to preach a bit more. We'll just see what God has in store there as far as like the next step. But that's kind of the plan now. We're locked in here, and we feel very confident that this is where God's got us, and we just want to continue to build, develop, and just multiply what He's given us here.
Yeah, and one thing I know about what you're doing is that you can always stay busy. There's always a meeting you can have. There's always people that are seeking your help and attention. There's always the message to deliver. There's always something you can work on. So I wasn't trying to put more work in your hands there, because I know you're a busy man, but I always wonder what people are seeking, right? And you're so young. You got such a future ahead for yourself. So who knows? Sky's the limit, man. Who knows where it takes you, right? So living in the moment, living in the day is truly one thing of importance, I believe, is just to really put that energy towards the right now as much as anything, because you want people to feel that energy. You want to help others, and you want to be in that moment. You don't want to get too far thinking ahead, and it takes you away from the here and now. And I think you're in that good space where you're really making an impact and continue to level up and doing things the right way, man. So I'm proud of you. I love you. You're a great friend and just a good person, a good heart, great soul. And I'm just thankful for you, man. So tell the audience here listening or watching how to find you, where to find you, and if they want to reach out to you, where they can go for that.
Absolutely. The Instagram is at Heath M. Cal. So that's HeathMCal. My name was taken. Hey, but one of them future goals, I might get the doctorate of ministry. So then I can do Dr. Heath Caldwell. I hope none of your viewers go and take that. But so on there, Facebook, it's Heath Caldwell. It's Heath Caldwell on YouTube as well. But David, I appreciate the time. Appreciate you having me on, and I'm honored to be the first pastor that you've had on the podcast. Wish you nothing but the best with the rest of the podcast, and look forward to listening to plenty more.
Hey, same goes to you, man. Thank you so much.
I've been chasing all these dreams, I'm getting very close. Your work shouldn't feel like work if you really love it. If you set and you know your worth, then think if it's worth it. But I do count my blessings first, so you know I'm grateful every night. But watch me, baby, I'ma take it there, tell ya I'ma stay the path, tell ya I've been chasing all these dreams, I'm getting very close. Here we go.